Captain Jake Morrison's boot scraped against the polished floor as the guards shoved him forward. His wrists burned where the energy cuffs dug into his skin. Blood had dried on his temple from the arrest 3 days ago, and his once crisp uniform hung in tatters. But Jake kept his head high as he entered the largest courtroom he'd ever seen. The Galactic Tribunal chamber stretched upward like a cathedral made of pure light. Crystalline walls shifted through colors that hurt to look at, shimmering between purple and green in shades that didn't have names in any human language. Thousands of aliens packed the floating galleries that spiraled up the walls. Jake could see them all staring down at him with their multiple eyes, their tentacles, their bizarre faces that evolution had shaped on 100 different worlds. The air hummed with the translation fields working overtime. Every hiss, click, growl, and whistle from the crowd got processed into words Jake could understand through his neural implant. Most of those words were insults. Murderer, someone chittered from the left gallery. Primitive savage, another voice bubbled. Humans should never have been allowed into space, a third alien growled. Jake ignored them all. His combat training had taught him to tune out distractions. Right now, his life depended on staying focused. At the front of the chamber sat the judge's bench, carved from what looked like a single massive gemstone. 7 aliens sat there in elaborate robes, but Jake's attention locked onto the one in the center. Judge Rothak of the Sovereign Collective. The insectoid alien stood nearly 8 feet tall even while sitting. His carapace gleamed like polished obsidian under the chamber's strange light, and his 6 compound eyes studied Jake with obvious contempt. When Rothak's mandibles clicked together, the sound echoed through the vast space like breaking bones. A guard yanked Jake to a stop in the center of the floor. A spotlight materialized above him, making him feel like a specimen under a microscope. Which, he supposed, he was. Humanity had only achieved faster than light travel 2 years ago. 2 years in a galaxy where some species had been exploring space for thousands of years. To most of the beings in this room, humans were barely evolved apes who'd stumbled into technology they didn't deserve. Judge Rothak rose to his full height. His voice came out as harsh clicks and scrapes, but Jake's translator turned it into words dripping with disgust. Captain Jake Morrison of the species Humanity. You stand accused of crimes against the galactic community. Mass murder. Destruction of property. Violation of sovereign space. The annihilation of Sovereign Collective Fleet Group 7 under your command. Rothak's mandibles spread wide in what might have been a smile. How does a creature from a species that just learned to leave its own star system dare to destroy an entire battle fleet? Jake opened his mouth to respond, but Rothak slammed a crystalline gavel against the bench. The sound rang through the chamber like a gunshot. Shut up, filthy human, Rothak spat. The translator didn't soften the venom in his voice. You will speak when I permit it, and not before. Your kind has polluted our galaxy for barely 2 cycles, and already you stand before us drenched in the blood of your betters. The crowd roared approval. Tentacles waved. Wings fluttered. Things Jake didn't have words for rippled with satisfaction. They wanted blood. His blood. The prosecutor oozed forward from a side entrance. The being looked like a massive blob of clear gel, roughly humanoid in shape but constantly shifting. Its name translated as something like Truth Seeker, though Jake suspected the irony of that name would become clear soon enough. Dozens of data displays floated around the prosecutor's gelatinous form, holographic screens showing images that made Jake's stomach turn even though he'd lived through them. The evidence is overwhelming, Truth Seeker burbled, its voice somehow carrying across the chamber despite having no visible mouth. 3 weeks ago, human vessels under Captain Morrison's command engaged Sovereign Collective Fleet Group 7 in the Kepler system. The fleet was on routine patrol when the humans opened fire without provocation. The prosecutor gestured and the holographic displays enlarged, filling the space above Jake's head. He watched his own ships appear on screen, firing missiles and particle beams. Collective vessels exploded in brilliant flashes. Debris spread across the void like glittering ash. Bodies tumbled through space, their life signs flatlined. Jake's jaw clenched. They were showing the battle, but they weren't showing the truth. 300 collective officers perished in this unprovoked attack, Truth Seeker continued. 300 families lost their providers. 300 futures erased by human violence. The Sovereign Collective demands justice for this atrocity. We demand this human's execution as an example to his primitive species. The crowd went wild. Aliens jumped to their feet, their calls for Jake's death echoing off the crystal walls in a dozen different languages. Some banged appendages against railings. Others screeched or howled. The translator gave up trying to process it all, and Jake just heard raw noise, the sound of thousands of beings who wanted him dead. Judge Rothak let it continue for a full minute before raising his claws for silence. The chamber quieted, though hostile murmurs continued to ripple through the galleries. The evidence appears conclusive, Rothak said, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Your vessels fired first. Your weapons destroyed an entire fleet. Your actions violated a dozen galactic community laws. This tribunal has presided over 1,000 cases from hundreds of species. We have never seen such blatant aggression from a species so new to space. The judge leaned forward, his compound eyes fixed on Jake like a predator studying prey. But we are civilized beings. We follow the law, even when dealing with primitives who do not. Therefore, you will be given the opportunity to speak. To grovel and beg for mercy, though it will not be granted. To explain why your savage species thought it could attack the sovereign collective without consequences. Rothak's voice dropped lower, somehow making the translator sound even more menacing. So speak, human. Tell us your pathetic excuses. Entertain us with your lies before we pass judgment. What defense could you possibly offer for genocide? Jake took a slow breath. His heart hammered in his chest, but years of military training kept his voice steady. He met Judge Rothak's compound eyes without flinching. Permission to present evidence, Your Honor. Several aliens in the gallery laughed. One made a sound like a deflating balloon. Another clicked what the translator rendered as the ape thinks it has evidence. But Judge Rothak's mandibles twitched. Amusement, Jake guessed. The judge was going to let him speak because it would be entertaining to watch him fail. Very well, Rothak said, settling back into his seat. Let us hear what pitiful excuse humanity offers for its barbarism. Present your evidence, Captain Morrison. Make it quick. Every word you speak only digs your grave deeper. Jake activated his neural implant, connecting to the data chip they'd somehow missed when searching him. A holographic display materialized in front of the tribunal, floating alongside the prosecutor's displays. 3 weeks ago, Jake began, his voice carrying across the silent chamber, Sovereign Collective Fleet Group 7 entered the Kepler system without authorization. I'm going to show you what really happened. And when I'm done, it won't be me on trial. Jake's hologram flickered to life, showing a blue and green planet rotating peacefully in space. 3 orbital stations circled it like silver rings, their lights twinkling against the darkness. This was New Haven, home to 12 million human colonists who'd spent 5 years turning a barren rock into a thriving world. This is what your fleet found 3 weeks ago, Jake said, his voice steady. An approved colony under Galactic Community Treaty 7-Alpha. Farmers. Families. Scientists. People who'd never fired a weapon in their lives. Judge Rothak waved a dismissive claw. We are aware of your settlements, human. Primitive agriculture worlds barely worthy of recognition. What does this prove? Jake ignored the insult and changed the display. Now it showed dozens of ship signatures appearing at the edge of the Kepler system. The Sovereign Collective Fleet, massive and menacing, their weapons systems already powering up. Your fleet entered our space at 0900 hours. No warning. No hailing frequencies. No diplomatic channels. They just appeared and started moving toward our planet. Jake highlighted the tactical formation on his display. This isn't a patrol formation, Your Honor. These ships are arranged for planetary bombardment. Every military academy in the galaxy teaches this pattern. The prosecutor pulsed an angry red color, its gelatinous body rippling with indignation. Absurd speculation. Fleet Group 7 was conducting routine security operations in that sector. Your interpretation of basic fleet positioning is meaningless. Then explain why we tried to contact them for 6 hours straight, Jake shot back. He pulled up communication logs, thousands of lines of data scrolling across the hologram. We sent hails in 47 different languages. We used every peaceful first contact protocol in the Galactic Community Handbook. Emergency codes. Diplomatic identifiers. We even transmitted in ancient collective dialects in case their translators were malfunctioning. The logs kept scrolling. Message after message sent into the void with no response. Jake had been on the bridge for all 6 of those hours, watching his communications officer grow more desperate with each ignored transmission. 6 hours, Jake repeated. And they didn't respond to a single message. Not one. But their weapons kept charging. Their formation kept tightening. They were getting ready to fire, and everyone on New Haven knew it. He switched the display again. Now it showed the fleet's tactical positions overlaid with weapons signatures. Energy readings climbed higher and higher, approaching critical levels. Any military officer in the chamber could read what those numbers meant. These are directed energy weapons at 95% charge, Jake said, pointing to clusters of red indicators. And these are plasma torpedo bays loaded and armed. This is enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. To turn continents into glass. To kill every living thing on New Haven in under an hour. A murmur ran through the galleries. Some aliens shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward with renewed interest. Judge Rothak's mandibles clicked rapidly, but he said nothing. Jake took a breath and played his ace card. But you don't have to take my word for it. Let's hear what Fleet Commander Vex said to his officers. He activated an audio file. The voice that filled the chamber spoke in the harsh, clicking language of the Sovereign Collective. The translator converted it to words that made several aliens in the gallery gasp. All ships, confirm targeting locks on civilian infrastructure. Habitat stations Alpha, Beta, and Gamma are primary targets. Destroy them first for maximum psychological impact. Ground bombardment will commence once orbital resistance is eliminated. Remember, compliance through terror is our objective. Make them understand the price of occupying collective territory. The chamber erupted. Aliens shouted at each other in a dozen languages. Some jumped to their feet in outrage. Others tried to silence them. Judge Rothak slammed his gavel repeatedly, but it took nearly a minute to restore order. Where did you obtain that recording? Rothak demanded, his voice sharp. Classified military communications are protected by galactic law. This evidence is inadmissible. I got it from the wreckage of the flagship after we destroyed it, Jake said coldly. And it's completely admissible because it proves your fleet came to commit genocide. You can verify the encryption signatures yourself. That message was sent on collective military channels using collective military protocols. It's authentic, and you know it. The prosecutor tried to recover. Even if that message is real, it proves nothing. Commander Vex may have been acting without authorization. The collective government cannot be held responsible for one rogue officer. One rogue officer commanding 37 ships. Jake raised an eyebrow. That's either the worst security breach in galactic history, or it was sanctioned from the top. But let's move on to the really interesting part. Let's talk about why your fleet wanted New Haven so badly. He changed the display to geological survey data. Lines of text and technical readings that meant nothing to most of the crowd. But Jake highlighted one section, and the number there made several aliens inhale sharply. Threnium deposits, Jake said. 0.7 million cubic meters of refined threnium in New Haven's mantle. That's enough to power faster than light drives for 1,000 ships for over a century. It's the single largest deposit of threnium discovered in this sector in 50 years. Whoever controls it controls the balance of power for 3 neighboring systems. Judge Rothak's carapace had started to darken. The insectoid equivalent of a human going pale. That survey data is classified. How did you? I'm getting to that, Jake interrupted. Here's the thing that really bothered me. When we first surveyed New Haven 6 years ago, our scans showed nothing. No threnium. No rare elements. Just decent soil and a breathable atmosphere. Perfect for farming. So we invested billions of credits and 5 years of labor building a colony on what we thought was a simple agricultural world. He pulled up the original survey data alongside the current readings. The difference was obvious even to non-experts. But once we started deep mining for water sources, we found the threnium. Except that's impossible. Threnium signatures are detectable from orbit. Our scanners should have found it immediately. Unless... Jake paused for effect. Unless someone falsified the original survey data. He zoomed in on the metadata attached to the original survey files. Timestamp codes. Authorization signatures. Source identifiers. And there, buried in lines of technical code, was a digital fingerprint. These files were processed through a sovereign collective data node 23 years ago. Before humanity even achieved faster than light travel. Before we knew New Haven existed. Your people found that planet, identified the threnium, and then deliberately hid it from galactic surveys. The prosecutor's gelatinous form had turned a sickly gray color. This is conspiracy theory nonsense. You're fabricating evidence to justify your crimes. Then verify it, Jake challenged. Every piece of data I've shown has quantum signatures and encryption stamps. These are your own records, pulled from your own systems. Unless you're suggesting I somehow traveled back in time and planted false evidence in collective military networks. A new presence materialized in the chamber. The air shimmered and compressed, and suddenly a figure made of pure crystal stood beside the judge's bench. She was 12 feet tall, her body refracting light into rainbows that danced across the walls. The chief arbiter of the Galactic Council herself, projecting from the capital world through quantum entanglement. Every alien in the chamber immediately fell silent. Even Judge Rothak seemed to shrink in his seat. The arbiter's voice was like wind chimes, translated into words that carried absolute authority. This tribunal is hereby suspended pending emergency investigation. Judge Rothak, you are removed from this case effective immediately. The Sovereign Collective stands accused of conspiracy to commit genocide, falsification of galactic survey data, and territorial theft through military force. You have a clear conflict of interest. Rothak started to protest, but one look from the arbiter silenced him. She turned her facete gaze to Jake, and despite his vindication, he felt the weight of something ancient and powerful studying him. However, Captain Morrison, the fact remains that 300 beings died when you destroyed that fleet. Regardless of their intentions, they were living creatures with families and futures. Galactic law requires justification for the taking of life, even in self-defense. You must prove that your actions were necessary and proportionate. Jake met her crystalline eyes without flinching. Then let me show you exactly what happened when they opened fire. Jake's hologram shifted to show the bridge of his ship, the UNSS Defiance. The timestamp in the corner read 3 weeks earlier. The bridge crew looked tense but calm, their hands moving across control panels as they monitored the approaching collective fleet. Jake could see himself in the captain's chair, younger by 3 weeks but already carrying the weight of what was about to happen. This is the moment 6 hours of attempted communication ended, Jake narrated, his voice quiet but carrying across the silent chamber. Our sensors detected the collective fleet's weapons reaching critical charge. We had maybe 90 seconds before they fired. On the hologram, alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed across the bridge displays. The tactical officer shouted something about weapons lock, her voice cracking with fear. Jake watched his past self grip the armrests of his chair, knuckles white. I gave the order to raise shields and prepare evasive maneuvers, Jake continued. We still didn't fire. I was hoping, praying even, that this was some massive misunderstanding. That they'd respond at the last second. That we could talk this out. The hologram showed the view from external cameras. 3 orbital habitat stations hung peacefully in space above New Haven, their observation decks probably full of colonists watching the drama unfold above them. Families pressed against the windows. Children pointing at the ships. Nobody understanding that they had seconds left to live. Then the collective fleet fired. The energy beams hit the stations so fast that the camera barely registered them. One moment the habitats were there, gleaming in the light of New Haven's sun. The next moment they were expanding clouds of fire and debris. The explosions were silent in the vacuum of space, but somehow that made them worse. 20,000 lives snuffed out without even a sound to mark their passing. Several aliens in the gallery made noises of shock. Even species that had no love for humanity seemed disturbed by the footage. Watching civilians die always hit differently than hearing about it in reports. Jake's voice had gone rough. 3 stations. 20,000 people. Gone in less than 4 seconds. Construction workers who were installing new solar panels. Teachers running a school on Habitat Beta. A medical center with 200 patients. Families who'd saved for years to afford passage to New Haven, looking for a fresh start. The hologram zoomed in on the debris field. Sections of hull tumbled through space. Furniture. Equipment. And bodies. So many bodies floating among the wreckage. The camera caught an escape pod launching from one of the stations just before it exploded, a desperate attempt at survival that had succeeded by mere seconds. But the collective fleet didn't just destroy the stations, Jake said. Watch what they did next. The hologram showed collective point defense systems tracking the escape pods. Small weapons meant for shooting down missiles, now targeting the tiny pods that held survivors. The beams lanced out with mechanical precision. Pod after pod exploded into scrap metal and vapor. They hunted down the survivors, Jake said, and his voice shook with barely controlled rage. People in escape pods. Unarmed civilians in ships that couldn't even maneuver properly. Your fleet spent 30 seconds making sure nobody escaped. Children. Elderly. Pregnant women. They killed them all. The chamber had gone deathly quiet. Even Judge Rothak seemed unable to speak. The arbiter's crystalline form pulsed with colors Jake couldn't interpret, but he sensed they weren't pleasant. That's when I gave the order to attack, Jake said. Because we had a choice to make in about 10 seconds. The collective fleet was already acquiring targeting locks on the planet's surface. They were going to bombard New Haven from orbit. 12 million people down there with nowhere to run. No shields. No defenses. Just farms and homes and schools. The hologram split into two screens. One showed the collective fleet's formation, weapons hot and ready. The other showed New Haven from orbit, peaceful and vulnerable. Cities sparkled with lights. Agricultural zones spread in green patchwork patterns. Lakes and rivers caught the sunlight. It looked like paradise. It was about to become hell. We had 8 ships, Jake continued. Patrol frigates, not warships. Each one carried maybe 40 crew members. The collective had 37 vessels including 2 dreadnoughts. Their smallest ship outgunned our biggest. The combat computer calculated our survival odds at 0.003%. He let that sink in. The aliens in the gallery could all do math. 8 ships against 37. 300 humans against thousands of collective soldiers with superior weapons and armor. It should have been a massacre. My tactical officer recommended retreat, Jake said. Jump to faster than light speeds, escape to the nearest Galactic Council station, file a formal complaint. By the time help arrived, New Haven would be gone, but at least would survive to tell the story. The hologram showed Jake's face on that bridge, 3 weeks ago. The moment of decision frozen in time. Jake remembered that feeling. The weight of 12 million lives pressing down on him. The knowledge that whatever he chose next would define humanity's place in the galaxy. I told her no, Jake said simply. Because humans don't run when our people need us. We don't abandon families to save ourselves. We fight. Even when we can't win. Especially when we can't win. The hologram resumed playing. Jake watched his past self lean forward in the captain's chair, watched himself give orders that would save millions and kill hundreds. All ships, this is Morrison. Weapons free. Protect New Haven at all costs. Make them pay for every inch. Make them regret coming here. What followed was 4 hours of the most brutal combat Jake had ever experienced. The hologram showed it all from multiple angles, camera feeds from different ships, sensor data, tactical displays that looked like chaos given digital form. The human ships didn't fight fair. They couldn't afford to. They used the debris from the destroyed habitats as cover, hiding behind chunks of twisted metal that had been someone's home minutes before. They deliberately vented atmosphere from damaged sections, creating unpredictable thrust that threw off enemy targeting computers. When missiles ran low, they got creative. The hologram showed the frigate Yorktown, its hull already breached in 3 places, limping toward a collective cruiser on emergency power. The cruiser's crew probably thought the human ship was retreating. Instead, Captain Rodriguez rammed the Yorktown directly into the cruiser's engine section at full acceleration. Both ships exploded in a ball of plasma hot enough to damage 2 nearby collective vessels. Captain Rodriguez and her crew of 38 died in that impact, Jake said quietly. Every single person on that ship volunteered for the ramming run. They drew straws to see who got to stay aboard. That's how badly they wanted to protect New Haven. Another ship, the Defiant, had lost all weapons but still had a functioning reactor. The hologram showed it docking with a collective dreadnought, using emergency clamps to lock the 2 ships together. Then the human crew set the reactor to overload and evacuated in the last remaining pod. 18 people survived the evacuation, Jake narrated. 42 stayed behind to make sure the reactor would breach. The explosion took out the dreadnought and crippled another capital ship. Those 42 saved thousands of lives down on the planet. The battle footage continued. Human ships dodging and weaving, taking hits that should have destroyed them but somehow staying in the fight. Crews working through injuries, through depressurization, through the knowledge that they were probably going to die. But always fighting. Always protecting the planet below. We adapted every tactic we could think of, Jake said. We used old warship designs from human history. Strategies from battles fought on Earth centuries ago. Things no galactic military would ever teach because they're considered too primitive. Too brutal. We rammed. We ambushed. We set traps. We turned our own damaged ships into weapons. The Arbiter spoke, her voice carrying something that might have been respect. You sacrificed hundreds of your own people to destroy that fleet. No, Jake corrected her, and his voice was firm. I gave them the choice to save millions. Every ramming run was voluntary. Every suicide mission had more volunteers than positions. These weren't sacrifices. These were warriors choosing to protect their families the only way they could. The hologram showed the final moments of the battle. Only 2 human ships remained functional, both heavily damaged. But the collective fleet was down to 4 ships, all of them crippled and bleeding atmosphere. The survivors jumped to faster than light speeds and ran, leaving their dead behind. Jake stood in the aftermath, surrounded by sensor data showing the debris field that stretched across the Kepler system. Wreckage from 33 collective vessels mixed with the remains of 6 human ships. 400 human crew members had died. 300 collective soldiers. But 12 million colonists on New Haven were alive. We made it expensive, Jake said, his voice hard as steel. We made them pay in blood and ships and fear. We made sure they'd remember what happens when you threaten human families. And when the shooting stopped, we pulled every survivor we could from the wreckage. Even collective survivors. Because despite everything, we're not monsters. He looked up at the Arbiter, at Judge Rothak, at the thousands of aliens filling the galleries. So yes, 300 collective soldiers died that day. But 20,000 civilians died first. And 12 million more would have followed if we hadn't fought back. Jake watched the courtroom process what they just witnessed. Some aliens looked disturbed. Others seemed confused. A few even looked impressed, though they tried to hide it. But Jake could see the question forming in their minds. The same question that had been asked since humanity first stepped into the galaxy 2 years ago. How did such a primitive species win against overwhelming odds? I need you to understand something, Jake said, changing the holographic display once more. Before you decide what happens next, you need to understand what humans are. Where we come from. What shaped us. The display showed Earth rotating slowly in space. Blue oceans covered 70% of the surface. White clouds swirled in elegant patterns. Green and brown continents looked peaceful from orbit. Several aliens in the gallery made appreciative sounds. It looked like a paradise world, the kind that most species dreamed of colonizing. This is Earth, Jake said. Our homeworld. Looks beautiful, doesn't it? Perfect conditions. Ideal temperatures. Abundant water. Most species look at this planet and think we got lucky. That we developed on an easy world. He zoomed the display closer, diving through the atmosphere into Earth's biosphere. The view changed dramatically. Now the aliens could see what Earth was really like. A great white shark erupted from the ocean, jaws wide enough to swallow a human whole. Its rows of teeth gleamed in the sunlight before it crashed back into the waves. The display shifted to show a pride of lions stalking across an African plain, their muscles rippling under golden fur as they hunted prey twice their size. Then to a grizzly bear standing 10 feet tall on its hind legs, claws like knives. Then to a pack of wolves circling an injured elk, their coordination and patience marking them as born predators. Earth is what the galactic community classifies as a death world, Jake said flatly. Not because of toxic atmosphere or radiation, but because of the life that evolved there. Everything on Earth is either predator or prey. Usually both. Several aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Judge Rothak's mandibles clicked nervously. Jake continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. Our atmosphere is 21% oxygen. Most of you know that's considered a fire hazard on civilized worlds. That much oxygen makes everything burn hotter and faster. Forest fires on Earth can consume entire mountain ranges in days. The display showed wildfires raging across California, walls of flame hundreds of feet high devouring everything in their path. Then it shifted to a volcanic eruption, magma founaining into the sky while ash clouds spread across continents. Then to a hurricane viewed from orbit, a spiral of destruction wider than most cities, with winds that could tear buildings apart. Our weather systems generate kinetic energy measured in gigatons, Jake said. A single hurricane carries more power than 100 nuclear weapons. Tornadoes can lift houses into the air. Earthquakes split the ground open beneath entire cities. Tsunamis drown coastlines. And this is just normal weather on Earth. This is what we deal with every year. An alien from the amphibian Quellan species spoke up, her translator rendering her burbling voice into words. Many worlds have dangerous environments, human. Volcanic activity and storms are not unique to your planet. This does not explain your victory. You're right, Jake agreed. Lots of worlds have dangerous environments. But here's what makes Earth different. On most death worlds, the native species evolve to avoid danger. They develop thick armor or the ability to burrow deep, or they migrate away from hazardous zones. They survive by hiding. He paused, letting that sink in, then changed the display to show early human ancestors. Not modern humans, but the species that came before. Australopithecus walking upright across grasslands. Homo erectus learning to control fire. Neanderthals hunting mammoths in Ice Age Europe. Humans didn't hide, Jake said. We couldn't. We didn't have armor plating or natural weapons. We weren't particularly fast or strong compared to Earth's predators. A lone human can't outrun a wolf pack or fight off a bear. So we developed something else. We got smart. We got stubborn. And we became persistence hunters. The display showed a group of early humans tracking an antelope across the African savanna. The footage was a reconstruction based on archaeological evidence, but it told the story clearly. The humans didn't try to catch the antelope in a sprint. They just followed it. 4 hours. Then days. Walking at a steady pace under the burning sun while the antelope ran and rested, growing more exhausted with each cycle. Persistence hunting, Jake explained. Our ancestors would track prey for days without stopping. We'd follow animals until they literally collapsed from exhaustion. Then we'd walk up and kill them with rocks. We didn't outrun death. We didn't outfight it. We outlasted it. We were too stubborn to give up. He could see understanding starting to dawn on some of the alien faces. The ones who'd studied military tactics were beginning to connect the dots. That mentality got encoded into our DNA over millions of years, Jake continued. Never quit. Never surrender. If you can't win by being stronger, win by lasting longer. If you can't beat them fairly, change the rules. Adapt or die. The display shifted to show human history. Stone Age tribes hunting with primitive spears. Bronze Age warriors clashing with swords and shields. Medieval knights in armor. Industrial Age soldiers with rifles. Modern militaries with tanks and aircraft. Each image showed humans fighting, always fighting, against each other and against the world itself. We've been at war for 10,000 years, Jake said, and his voice carried no pride, just cold fact. Humans fighting humans. Tribe against tribe. Nation against nation. We've developed every possible way to kill each other. Every tactic. Every strategy. Every psychological warfare technique. We've studied violence the way other species study art or philosophy. An insectoid alien in the gallery chittered something the translator rendered as disturbed disbelief. You're saying your entire species is built for war? That's monstrous. No, Jake corrected. We're built for survival. War is just one tool we developed. We also created music and literature and medicine. We build hospitals and schools. We write poetry and paint pictures. We're not monsters. We're survivors who learned that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to become dangerous to those who take it away. The display showed the Battle of New Haven again, but from a different perspective. Jake highlighted the tactical decisions his ships had made. The improvisation. The adaptation. The willingness to sacrifice individual ships to save the fleet. When the collective attacked New Haven, they expected us to fight like a proper military, Jake said. Organized formations. Standard tactics. Predictable responses. Instead, we fought like humans. We used every dirty trick we'd learned in 10,000 years of warfare. We adapted our strategy every 30 seconds. We turned our weaknesses into weapons. He showed footage of the Yorktown's ramming run, but this time he added context. Captain Rodriguez was a history professor before she joined the Space Force. She studied ancient naval battles from Earth's age of sail. When her ship lost weapons, she remembered how wooden ships would ram each other in desperation. A 400-year-old tactic that no modern military would ever expect. The display showed another ship using debris as cover. Lieutenant Patterson grew up hunting in the mountains of Colorado. He learned to use terrain for concealment when stalking deer. He applied the same principle in space combat, hiding his frigate behind chunks of destroyed habitat station. More examples followed. Tactics pulled from ancient Earth battles. Strategies adapted from hunting techniques. Psychological warfare borrowed from human conflicts that happened before most species in this courtroom had discovered fire. We're not better than you, Jake said, meeting the eyes of aliens throughout the chamber. We're not smarter or stronger. But we've been fighting for survival since before we climbed down from the trees. It's in our bones. Our instincts. Our culture. When you attacked our colony, you didn't encounter a new species learning the rules of galactic warfare. He paused, letting the silence stretch. You encountered Earth's apex persistence predators who just watched their families die. You encountered 12 million descendants of survivors who spent millions of years learning one lesson over and over again. Jake's voice dropped to something cold and absolute. Never. Give. Up. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even Judge Rothak had gone completely still, his mandibles frozen mid-click. The Arbiter's crystalline form pulsed with colors that might have been respect or might have been concern. Finally, a council member from the reptilian sauric species spoke, his voice thoughtful. You're saying your species' entire evolutionary history prepared you for that battle? That you won not through superior technology or numbers, but through pure stubborn refusal to lose? Yes, Jake said simply. And that's what the galactic community needs to understand about humanity. We don't want war. We'd much rather farm and build and explore. But if you back us into a corner, if you threaten our people, you'll discover what 4 billion years of evolution on a death world created. He looked directly at the Arbiter. You'll discover that humans are really, really good at surviving impossible situations. Because we've been doing it our entire existence. The Arbiter's crystalline form brightened, filling the chamber with shifting rainbow light. Jake watched as she seemed to grow larger, her presence demanding absolute attention from every being in the courtroom. Even the whispers in the galleries died completely. For a long moment, she simply studied Jake with those facete eyes that had witnessed 1,000 species rise and fall across the galaxy. The tribunal will deliberate, she announced, her voice like wind through crystal caves. Captain Morrison, you have presented evidence that contradicts the original charges. However, the weight of your actions cannot be dismissed. 300 lives ended under your command. This requires careful consideration. She turned to face the other council members seated along the bench. Jake couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see their bodies shifting, their various appendages moving in what he assumed was debate. Some pointed at the holographic evidence still floating in the air. Others gestured toward Jake himself. Judge Rothak sat frozen in his seat, his carapace having turned an ashen gray color that probably meant he understood his career was finished. The minutes stretched on. Jake's legs started to ache from standing in one place, but he refused to show weakness now. Not when everything hung in the balance. He could feel the eyes of thousands of aliens boring into him from the galleries above. Some hostile. Some curious. A few that might have been sympathetic, though he couldn't be sure with alien expressions. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes, the Arbiter turned back to face the chamber. The other council members settled into their seats. The rainbow light emanating from her body shifted to a deep blue that reminded Jake of Earth's oceans. This tribunal has reached a decision, the Arbiter declared. Her voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber, enhanced by technology Jake didn't understand. We have reviewed all evidence presented by both prosecution and defense. We have verified the authenticity of Captain Morrison's data through independent quantum analysis. We have consulted historical precedent and galactic law. She paused, and Jake's heart hammered so hard he thought the aliens nearest him might hear it. Captain Jake Morrison of the species Humanity, this tribunal finds you not guilty of murder, not guilty of unprovoked aggression, and not guilty of violating sovereign space. The chamber exploded. Half the aliens in the galleries leaped to their feet in outrage, their various languages creating a wall of sound that overwhelmed the translator systems. The other half seemed shocked into silence or erupted in what Jake hoped was approval. Judge Rothak actually fell backward off his seat, his legs flailing as he tried to process what he'd just heard. The Arbiter raised one crystalline hand and the chamber fell silent again, though Jake could see aliens still arguing in whispers and gestures. The evidence conclusively proves that Sovereign Collective Fleet Group 7 initiated hostilities against civilian targets, the Arbiter continued, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The fleet commander's own communications demonstrate clear intent to commit genocide against the New Haven colony for the purpose of territorial acquisition. The falsification of geological surveys represents a conspiracy spanning 2 decades. She turned her gaze on Judge Rothak, and the insectoid alien seemed to shrink under that stare. Furthermore, Judge Rothak's presence on this tribunal while his own government stood accused represents a severe conflict of interest that borders on corruption. An investigation into the Sovereign Collective's actions will begin immediately. If evidence of conspiracy is confirmed, sanctions will include territorial forfeitures, military restrictions, and criminal charges against government officials who authorized this operation. Rothak tried to speak, his mandibles clicking weakly, but no words came out. His entire body trembled. Jake almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Captain Morrison's actions, the Arbiter continued, while resulting in significant loss of life, fall clearly under galactic law's provisions for self-defense and defense of civilian populations. He attempted peaceful communication for 6 hours. He acted only after hostile forces had already killed 20,000 colonists and were preparing to bombard a planetary surface. His tactics, while unconventional and brutal, achieved the objective of protecting 12 million lives. The prosecutor, Truth Seeker, had turned a pale sickly color and was oozing backward toward the exit. No one tried to stop it. Its case had been destroyed, and everyone knew it. But the Arbiter wasn't finished. She turned her full attention to Jake, and her voice took on a different tone. Still authoritative, but carrying something else. A warning. Captain Morrison, you and your species are cleared of all charges. Humanity retains its membership in the galactic community. New Haven Colony is recognized as legitimate human territory, and the Threnium deposits belong to your people by right of settlement. However, I must now speak not just as a judge, but as someone who has watched civilizations rise and fall for 3,000 years. The chamber went absolutely silent. Even the hostile aliens stopped their whispering to listen. Humanity has proven itself formidable, the Arbiter said, each word carefully chosen. Your species possesses remarkable adaptability. Your willingness to sacrifice for your communities is admirable. Your tactical creativity is impressive. Your stubborn refusal to surrender even against impossible odds is noted by every species in this chamber. Jake heard the but coming before she said it. But the galactic community is not maintained through strength alone. We have 3,000 member species. Millions of worlds. Trillions of beings. We survive because we choose cooperation over conflict. We choose diplomacy over destruction. We choose restraint even when we possess the power to destroy our enemies. Her form shifted through colors, settling on a deep red that made Jake think of warning lights. Your people have proven you can fight. You have demonstrated that attacking humanity carries severe costs. This is valuable information for the galaxy to have. However, if humanity ever becomes the aggressor, if your species turns its formidable nature toward conquest rather than defense, you will face unified opposition. Not one fleet, but thousands. Not one species, but all of them. The Council's patience has limits, and our mercy ends where aggression begins. Jake understood the message clearly. The galaxy now respected humanity's ability to fight. But they also feared it. And fear could turn dangerous if humanity made the wrong moves. He straightened his shoulders, meeting the Arbiter's gaze without backing down. With respect, Arbiter, I need to make something clear as well. A murmur of shock rippled through the galleries. Several aliens made sounds of disbelief. You didn't interrupt the Arbiter. You especially didn't contradict her. But Jake had come this far by refusing to back down, and he wasn't about to start now. To her credit, the Arbiter simply tilted her crystalline head, gesturing for him to continue. Humanity didn't choose to evolve on a death world, Jake said, his voice carrying across the chamber. We didn't ask to be shaped by millions of years fighting for survival. We didn't want to spend 10,000 years at war with ourselves. Given the choice, we'd much rather live in peace. We'd rather focus on art and science and exploration. We'd rather be friends with the galaxy, not feared by it. He took a step forward, and the energy cuffs that had bound his wrists fell away, released by the Arbiter's authority. Jake rubbed feeling back into his hands as he continued speaking. But here's what the galactic community needs to understand. We'll follow your laws. We'll be good citizens. We'll contribute to the community and honor our treaties. We want peace, genuine peace, where our colonies aren't targeted for resources and our people aren't slaughtered because someone decided we were inconvenient. His voice hardened, taking on the edge of absolute conviction. But if anyone tries what the collective tried, if anyone thinks they can attack human families and get away with it, they'll learn what we call a Pyrrhic victory. We'll make it so expensive, so bloody, so devastating that even if they win, they'll spend the next century wishing they'd never started. Not because we're evil or because we love war, but because we've spent 4 billion years learning one fundamental truth. Jake paused, looking around at the thousands of alien faces watching him. Survival isn't about being the biggest or the strongest or having the best weapons. It's about being too stubborn to quit. Too determined to die. Too committed to protecting your own to ever give up, no matter what the odds say. The collective fleet learned that lesson. I hope it's one the rest of the galaxy never needs to learn firsthand. The chamber sat in absolute silence for 3 heartbeats. Then, slowly, aliens began rising to their feet. Not all of them. Not even most of them. But enough. Species from across the galaxy, standing in what Jake recognized as respect. Some of them had been calling for his execution an hour ago. Now they understood what humanity represented. A new species in the galaxy. One that had earned its place not through ancient lineage or superior technology, but through sheer determination and the will to protect their own at any cost. The Arbiter's form shifted to a warm golden color. Captain Morrison, you are free to go. Your ship and crew will be released. Safe passage back to New Haven is guaranteed under council protection. And for what it's worth, I hope your species finds the peace you're looking for. The galaxy is better for having humans in it, as long as that stubbornness of yours is directed at cooperation rather than conflict. Jake nodded respectfully. That's all we've ever wanted, Arbiter. Just give us a fair chance, and humanity will surprise you. We're good at more than just fighting. We're also pretty good at being friends, once people stop trying to kill us. A sound rippled through the chamber that Jake's translator had trouble processing. It took him a moment to realize what it was. Laughter. Dozens of different species, laughing at his blunt honesty. Even the Arbiter's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been amusement. As Jake walked toward the chamber exit, past galleries full of aliens who now watched him with respect instead of contempt, he allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had passed its first real test in the galactic community. They'd proven they could fight when necessary. But more importantly, they'd proven they fought for the right reasons. Behind him, guards were escorting Judge Rothak out through a different exit, the disgraced judge's career in ruins. The prosecutor had already fled. And somewhere in the Sovereign Collective's capital, politicians were probably panicking as they realized their conspiracy had been exposed. But Jake didn't care about any of that. He just wanted to go home to New Haven, to see the planet they'd saved, to honor the 400 crew members who'd given their lives to protect 12 million colonists. As he reached the chamber doors, an alien approached him. One of the reptilian sauric species, wearing the insignia of a military officer. The alien performed what Jake's cultural database identified as a gesture of respect among his people. Captain Morrison, the saurics officer said, his translator rendering his hissing speech into clear words. My government wishes to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. We would be honored if you would visit our worlds. We have much to discuss about military tactics and defensive strategies. Jake shook the offered claw, feeling the scales cool and dry against his palm. I'd be happy to, Commander. But fair warning, most of what we do is stuff your military academies would probably consider cheating. The saurics officer's eyes glittered with something that might have been respect or might have been excitement. Captain, after what you showed us today, my people understand that in real combat, there's no such thing as cheating. There's only winning and losing. And we'd very much like to learn from a species that refuses to lose. As Jake finally stepped out of the tribunal chamber into the corridors beyond, he couldn't help but think about how much had changed in a single day. Humanity had entered that courtroom as accused criminals, primitive savages who'd overstepped their bounds. They were leaving as equals. Respected, feared, and finally understood. The filthy human had become something the galaxy would remember. And that was exactly what humanity needed.